give U.S. taxpayers back the $179 million that we overpaid. Plain and simple. If the State Department gave most of that away to the UN in some backroom deal, then we will make sure that we can recoup these funds from the Department. With that, Madam Speaker, I reserve the balance of our time.
The gentlelady reserves her time. The gentleman from California.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I'm very pleased to yield 3 minutes to the Chairman of the Homeland Security, Mr. King of New York.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 3 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I rise in opposition to this legislation. And I say that as one who has voted continually for reform at the UN, who has been critical of funding procedures involving the UN. But I'm here today to save lives. The fact is, contrary to what's been said, I don't want to get caught in a counting debate. I don't want to get caught in a fight between Democrats and Republicans, between the Obama administration, the State Department, the UN, between chairmen and ranking members. I am here because of the fact that this is not something that started 3 months ago or 4 months ago or 5 months ago. This has been an ongoing matter between the New York City Police Department and the UN and the State Department. The results of an attack in this area would be catastrophic. I'm not going to go into the details, but anyone who wants to check the series of correspondence going back long before this became an issue here in Congress, about how vital it was to have this $100 million in construction changes and hardening made, whether we're talking about First Avenue or the FDR Drive or the perimeter. The fact is, this is a disaster waiting to happen. And I would say to members on both sides, if there is an attack, if there is a vehicle bomb, if there is an attack in these areas that have been designated by Commissioner Kelly, and we see hundreds of lives lost or thousands of lives lost, we're going to come back and say, well, that could have been taken care of, but it was in this account rather than that account. It was authorized but not appropriated, or it was spent by the UN at the direction of the State Department, and Congress didn't have time to act in time. The fact is, this is a matter of life and death. This is a serious matter. I was on the phone late last night at midnight with the highest-ranking people in the New York City Police Department, and how vital this is to them. We can have our debate back and forth. We can go back and forth on when it should have been done, who was hiding what. The fact is, I'm concerned with saving lives, not just for New Yorkers, but all the tourists that visit there, the impact this would have. And for people who are concerned about saving money, think of, put it in very harsh economic terms, what this would do to our economy if a car bomb went off in the vicinity specified by Commissioner Kelly, and we saw lives being lost, people being burned to death. We saw buildings coming down because we felt the money wasn't done exactly the appropriate way as far as which part of the balance sheet it came off. So I am urging my colleagues to save lives, to do what has to be done for security, put partisan politics aside. And it's not just important to know the cost of something, it's important to know the value of something and the damage that can be caused if that value is impaired. So I urge the defeat of this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Florida.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Burton, the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Europe and Eurasia.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank the gentlelady for yielding, and I want to congratulate her on being the new chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and I know she's going to do an outstanding job. Let me just start off by saying the UN has been a scandal-ridden mess for as far back as I can remember. I've been in Congress 28 years, and we've had scandal after scandal after scandal. The people over there that have been overpaid, comparing it to the private sector, for accountants, for business, for all kinds of things. And we've raised Cain about it on this floor, but nothing ever changes. Remember the oil scandal involving Iraq? Remember Saddam Hussein and the deals that were cut and how the UN was involved in that? Nothing ever changed. We keep throwing the money in the same direction and the same amounts year after year after year. We give them 22% of their budget. Now, if you take all the countries in the world that are involved in the UN, you'll find that we're sending a real disproportionate amount of money to them. Our share should not be 22%. Nevertheless, we do it year after year after year. And now we find out that the UN Tax Equalization Fund, the TEF, was overpaid $179 million. Why in the world should we allow them to keep our money? We're already paying them more than we should, in my opinion. I heard what my colleagues said about the security of the place and all that. We give them more than enough money to take care of the place and to pay the salaries and to do what needs to be done over there. That is, if you support everything the UN does. But to allow them to keep almost $180 million of our money when it's an overpayment makes no sense whatsoever. So what we're saying here today is, you know, we're just going to hold this money back if they don't return what they already owe us. Now, if we had any other creditor that owes us money, or if you had a creditor in your hometown, you would expect that creditor to pay you back. You'd expect them to pay what they owe. But the UN is a different thing. Why? Makes no sense to me whatsoever. I've been here long enough to know that there have been problem after problem after problem with the UN. And we've complained about it. We have done very little to correct that, but we've complained about it time and again. But at the very, very least, we should expect them to pay us back the money that they owe us. So I wish my colleagues would think about this from a logical point of view. Why should we let them keep money that they owe the United States, especially at a time when we have a $14 trillion, get that, $14 trillion national debt? We're going to be $1.5 trillion short this year, and the legacy we're going to leave to our kids and grandkids is unbelievably bad. And so this is a drop in the bucket, no question about it. But I think we should get our $170 million back, and I hope my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will concur. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm very pleased to yield 3 minutes to the ranking member of the Homeland Security Committee, Mr. Thompson of Mississippi.
The gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the gentleman yielding me the time. Madam Speaker, this is a fundamental principle that we developed in the Homeland Security Committee, where we work with our stakeholders to protect this country. The notion of taking the resources away from the New York City Police Department, a major stakeholder in keeping this country safe, does not make sense. Representative King, the new chairman of the committee, outlined in a very passionate statement how this would devastate New York City. That partnership we've created has rendered results. All of the statistics that we have gleaned on this committee indicate that New York City is the #1 terrorist target in the United States. This $100 million investment with the New York Police Department is an investment in security. What we have here is smoke and mirrors that ultimately will render the citizens of New York City vulnerable to any potential attack. So I call upon my colleagues to oppose this unfortunate cut in the name of getting paid back, and look at it in what ultimate damage it will cause. The New York City Police Department is known worldwide for its security investments and enhancements, but that's because of the partnership it's had with the federal government. We shouldn't punish the good people of New York for some ostensive reason with the United Nations. And let's talk a little bit about the United Nations. We're fortunate to have them on our shores here in the United States. That's worth a lot. We bring a lot of people to this country. Thousands of tourists visit that building every day. And so why all of a sudden we want to limit the security of those individuals, among others, who visit that building just because we're trying to, quote, get some money back? Well, we're bigger than that. We have to lead by example. The best example we can do here today is to defeat this unwarranted, mean-spirited bill that does not provide any security for the good people of New York or the people who work in and around the United Nations building. You know, that building was put here in 1951. It's been here a long time. We've been that beacon of hope for a world order, and now all of a sudden we jeopardize it in a document that clearly we understand that will not really cost any more money. So I yield the balance of my time back, but I ask for a vote in opposition of H.R. 519.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Florida.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We're going to continue to reserve for a while because we want to get the times a little more equal. So
The
we'll
gentlelady
just
reserves
sit
her
it out.
time. The gentleman from California.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I'm very pleased to yield to the gentlelady from New York, in whose district these security and perimeter improvements are being made. Ms. Maloney, 2 minutes.
The gentlelady from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding to me and for leading on so many important issues for the safety of our country and world peace. I rise in strong opposition to this legislation, which would, I believe, make New York City more vulnerable to terrorist attacks. And this includes people that I represent who are visiting or live around the UN compound. The bill would divert funds that the UN has, that the State Department, the United Nations, and the New York City Police Department have planned to use for much-needed security enhancements to the UN compound and surrounding perimeter in Manhattan. I just spoke earlier today with Police Commissioner Kelly, who says these funds are absolutely critical to maintain Homeland Security. Homeland Security should be the #1 priority for this country, and not having these funds would put at risk the lives of people who work there, people who visit, and people who live in the area. We know that threats of terrorist attacks are real. New York City has been attacked twice, and the police commissioner told me today that there have been 11 attempted attacks since 9/11, which they have stopped. So it is a real threat. And as a host country, we have a responsibility to protect the diplomats and those who work and visit the United Nations. And we know that the UN is a terrorist attack target across the world, most notably in 2003, the attack in Iraq, and in 2007, the attack in Algeria. So this is important. This vote, if you support the funding and the continued Homeland Security, will save lives. I would like to point out, very importantly, and place in the record, a statement from the nonpartisan CBO. And they have said that this will not, and I quote, will not provide any savings to taxpayers. So if we're not providing savings to taxpayers, why are we not willing to speak out and vote for saving lives and security? I urge a strong no vote on this legislation. I yield back. Thank you.
Gentlelady yields back. Does the gentlelady continue to reserve her time? The gentleman from California.
Yes, Madam Speaker, may I ask about the remaining time on both sides?
The gentleman from California has 7 minutes remaining, and the gentlelady from Florida has 3.5 minutes remaining.
Madam Speaker, I'm very pleased to yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from Minnesota, former member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Mr. Ellison.
The gentleman is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, H.R. 519 is wrongheaded and should be defeated. This bill cuts the United Nations Tax Equalization Refund Act as part of a gimmicky House Republican U-Cut proposal. According to the CBO, our nonpartisan official scorekeeper, H.R. 519 has absolutely no effect on the federal budget. It saves nothing, not a penny. So what would this bill do if enacted? It would put urgently needed security upgrades to the United Nations headquarters at risk. This bill would undermine the protection that we're trying to provide to the people who live in New York. Haven't they suffered enough already? In fact, the State Department has already committed $100 million from this fund to help the New York Police Department, who request the support to secure the perimeter against terrorist threats. And these threats are serious, Madam Speaker. UN facilities in Iraq and Algeria have already been attacked. And I must say, Madam Speaker, this is part of an extreme agenda that is anti-United Nations from the start. So let me just say in conclusion, often my colleague and I, Mr. King, don't agree. But we agree on this one 100%. Mr. King said, and I quite agree with him, that this bill would undermine security in New York City. It's wrong and indefensible, and I would say that I think he's absolutely right. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to yield for a unanimous consent request to a gentleman you may be familiar with, Mr. Mack of Florida, who is the chairman of our Western Hemisphere Subcommittee.
Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert a statement into the record in support of what the chairwoman is doing, chairman is doing on the UN. I think it's a disgrace that we continue to fund an organization like the UN when, in fact, they tend to hinder progress instead of help it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Without objection. The gentleman from California.
Yes, thank you. The gentlelady is yielding, continuing to yield. I'm very pleased to yield 1.5 minutes to the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Clark.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Berman, and thank you, Madam Speaker. As a New Yorker and a member of the Homeland Security Committee, I rise in strong opposition to this misguided, ill-advised legislation, which would limit the New York Police Department's ability to protect American citizens in the nation's most at-risk city. According to the State Department, up to $100 million of the $179 million that the other side is seeking to cut from the UN Tax Equalization Fund has been reprogrammed to help enhance security around the UN complex in New York City. As the only member of the Committee on Homeland Security from New York City, I know firsthand the vital role that the NYPD plays in protecting not only UN workers, but city residents and millions of tourists that visit each year. I have a particular concern to ensure that the NYPD is adequately funded to meet the challenges of defending the UN and New York City. With the broad array of threats that New York City faces, it is unfathomable that we would consider hindering the NYPD's ability to protect one of the most important areas of the city. The NYPD has protected visiting dignitaries and the city during the United Nations General Assembly for decades, and we must support our public safety officials and invest in the training and equipment to prevent and respond to emergencies. We should not take away the resources needed for the NYPD to protect citizens, prevent and mitigate terrorist threats. As we near the 10th anniversary of 9/11, we are reminded that New York City has been the target of multiple significant terrorist plots. United Nations facilities located around the globe have been targeted by terrorists. A vote for this legislation is a vote to expose New York City to extreme risk and recklessness at best. I urge my colleagues to vote against this misguided and potentially harmful legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back her time. Does the gentlelady from Florida continue to reserve?
To reserve, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from California.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Kucinich.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank the gentleman. You need to look more carefully at the U-Cut program. You know the U.S. can't withdraw from the world, nor can we be the policeman of the world, but we can protect the people who work at the UN in New York. Is this a U-Cut for sovereignty? Will you seek to cut funds for the WTO, which doesn't allow Buy America? Let's talk real sovereignty. Will you withdraw from China trade? No. Will you withdraw from NAFTA and GATT? No. Reduce the power of the Fed? No. Let's talk real savings. Will you cut funds from the Pentagon? No. Will you cut money for the war in Iraq? No. Will you cut funds for the war in Afghanistan? No. Will you cut money for U.S. bases around the world? No. But you're going to cut funds for New York City Police to protect citizens. When you do that, you cut off your nose to spite your face.
The Chair will remind members to direct their comments to the Chair, and the gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Florida continues to reserve her time.
Continue to reserve.
Gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, may I inquire through the Chair? We have 2 more speakers. Shall we go with ours and then?
Yes, yours and then mine.
Okay. I'm very pleased to yield. I think now I can do a minute and a half to Mr. Andrews.
The gentleman is recognized for a minute and a half. Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as we meet here this afternoon, there are 15 million Americans unemployed. And yet we're passing up yet another opportunity to work together to try to create jobs in our country. And what are we doing? We're passing a spending reduction bill that the Congressional Budget Office says doesn't have any impact on the budget at all. So we're not saving any money. We're passing a bill, or some of us are going to pass a bill, that the New York City Police Commissioner, who's entrusted with defending people around the UN, says is dangerous because it impairs his ability to do that. And at a time when the most dangerous area of the world is literally in flames, and calling out for cooperation between our country and other countries around the world to try to calm things down, we're sending a signal to the most important international institution that our participation is somehow contingent upon domestic politics. We should be doing a jobs bill, not putting our imprimatur today on a bill that's yet another exercise in politics. The right vote for the country is no. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on H.R. 519.
Without objection.
And with that, Madam Speaker, I'd like to yield 2 minutes and 15 seconds to the gentleman from California, Mr. Royce, the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Subcommittee on Terrorism, Nonproliferation, and Trade.
The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes and 15 seconds.
Thank you. We do get $179 million back into the Treasury, which the CBO does not count as a savings. But if we pass this, we do get the money back. It's obvious that these security upgrades should be funded through the UN Capital Master Plan. That's the $2 billion 5-year effort to renovate the UN headquarters in New York. We do know that by rating the TEF overpayments owed to American taxpayers rather than funding the construction properly through the Capital Master's Plan, we do know that the State Department and the UN will stick with American taxpayers with 100% of the bill rather than the 22% we would owe if it was funded through proper channels. That's what this debate's about. It's not about whether UN headquarters in New York should have adequate security. It is about how the costs of that security should be apportioned and whether the funding process can bear even minimal scrutiny. U.S. overpayment into the Tax Equalization Fund are owed to the United States, and the State Department should instruct the UN to return that money. Now, when the UN is sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars, in the change in this case, the UN actually told us about this. That's good to know. But one thing has kept it from being returned to the Treasury, and that is the U.S. hasn't asked for its money back. When we Americans are overassessed or overpay the IRS, we get a refund. Well, when the Obama administration overpays the United Nations, they say, keep the check. We had a Foreign Affairs meeting the other week. We were told the UN really can't even give you an honest accounting of their annual budget. The budget is somewhere between $5 and $6 billion annually. Hundreds of millions is literally considered a rounding error there, but this is no rounding error to U.S. taxpayers. It is $179 million. We carry 22% of that budget over there. China carries less than 3%. They should at least be asked to carry their 3% of the costs going forward. So let's take this step. Let's ask for the money back that they've told us at the UN that we have overpaid, and let's put it into Treasury at a time when we're running a $1.5 trillion budget deficit. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We only have one remaining speaker. You want to?
Thank you.
You close, I guess, right? Yeah.
Correct. We have 2 speakers, Mr. Berman, so I'm pleased to yield, Madam Speaker, 45 seconds to the gentleman from Florida, my colleague, Mr. Rivera.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 45 seconds.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. I rise today in support of making it policy that the UN return the $179 million. The U.S. is the United Nations' largest financial supporter. We pay most of the cost of UN peacekeeping operations. We pay for most of its security costs. And now the Obama administration refuses to let the United Nations pay us back. Just one example, in 2005, then UN Secretary General Kofi Annan acknowledged the core failings of the UN Human Rights Council by stating that the countries who have sought membership on the Human Rights Council did so not to strengthen human rights, but to protect themselves against criticism. This is still the case today, as some of the world's worst terrorist regimes and enemies of freedom and individual liberty, including Cuba and China, hold powerful seats on the UN Human Rights Commission. The UN needs to reform. It is time to end their dependency on the U.S. They should be an organization for peace, human rights, and freedom across the world. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself the remaining time.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, let's go through some of the issues and sort of disaggregate all of this. We have a bill that seeks to withhold funds unless the Secretary of State certifies she's gotten back $179 million for the fund. The fund doesn't have $179 million because $100 million has been designated to this perimeter security on FDR Drive at the request of the New York Police Department. Why did they do it that way? Because to do it now, in the context of the overall UN reconstruction, will save at least $100 million over doing it when we finish appropriating. Well, why didn't we do an appropriation? Well, if anyone has noticed, the Congress didn't exactly do appropriations this fiscal year. So we are left in a situation where the administration makes a decision to designate $100 million from the fund to do something that if they don't do it now will cost twice as much to do it later through the appropriated process, and to take the rest of that fund and offset it against our fiscal year 12 dues. But the strangest part of this bill, in addition to all the arguments that have been made, is it seeks to withhold the payment of dues that the CBO says will have already been paid, and there will be nothing to withhold. Fiscal year 11 dues will be paid before this bill is ever law, and you can ask the Secretary and require the Secretary to withhold a certain amount of dues, but once you've paid it all, there's nothing to withhold. It's really a poorly crafted bill, not contemporaneous with the situation that exists now, that seeks to jeopardize an important security project and start us going down the road towards simply trying to not pay, but it won't even work to not pay the dues that we owe through our assessed contributions. I yield back the balance of my time and urge a no vote.
The gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to yield the remainder of our time to Mr. Duncan of South Carolina. How much time does he have left, Madam Speaker?
The gentleman has 30 seconds.
He is an auctioneer. He can do it.
The gentleman is recognized for 30 seconds.
Close the sale.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, only in Washington can we have the debate over how desperately New York and the UN needs $100 million, while simultaneously arguing that not giving that money to the UN would not result in savings for the U.S. taxpayer. If money is vital in one account, how can it be worthless in another? The truth is the CBO is restrained in its analysis, and because of those rules that it's forced to observe, it reached the conclusion that having the UN repay $179 million would have no impact on our balance book. How can getting $179 million from the UN not be counted as savings? Does any person who has ever balanced a checkbook believe this to be true? Of course not. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Time having expired, the question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 519? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds.
Speaker, on that, I'd ask the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays. The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, proceedings will resume on motions to suspend the rules previously postponed. Votes will be taken in the following order: S-188 by the yeas and nays, and H.R. 519 by the yeas and nays. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. Remaining electronic votes will be conducted as 5-minute votes. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from California, Mr. Denham, to suspend the rules and pass S-188, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Senate 188, an act to designate the United States Courthouse under construction at 98 West 1st Street, Yuma, Arizona, as the John M. Roll United States Courthouse.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? Members will record their votes by electronic device, and this will be a 15-minute vote.
Two bills and two votes on the House floor today. The first vote here, 15 minutes, on a bill that would name the federal courthouse in Yuma, Arizona, after the late federal judge John Roll, who was killed in the shooting last month in Arizona, in Tucson, along with 5 others. The second bill involves the United Nations. This is a bill, H.R. 519, that was brought up based on some of the results of the UCut website that Eric Cantor is hosting. H.R. 519 would call for the return of $180 million overpaid to the United Nations into what's called the UN Tax Equalization Fund. Over the course of a number of years, the U.S. has paid in about $180 million over what they should have paid. And the problem is the United Nations Capital Master Plan has already designated some of that money, about $100 million of it, for security issues in and around UN headquarters in New York. The Obama administration is supporting the use of those funds. The Republicans calling for the return of that. The remaining $80 million, they say, according to the administration is approved, is that the remaining $80 million of that would go to future U.S. UN contributions. So that will come up next. That's the second vote in this series. First one is 15 minutes. The second one is a 5-minute vote. And already the Politico reporting that the Republicans are bracing for another floor loss on that vote. They write that Republican aides are telling them, John Bresnahan and Jake Sherman, that the House will fail to pass a bill Wednesday that would retrieve money already paid to the United Nations. Since both bills come up under suspension of the rules, it will take 2/3 of those present and voting here in the House for that to pass. Well, Republican leaders are at the White House or have been at the White House having lunch with President Obama, Speaker Boehner, the Majority Leader Eric Cantor, and the Chief Whip Kevin McCarthy at the White House this afternoon, presumably coming back to the U.S. House to vote. But earlier today, they did hold a news conference after the House Republican Conference met. They spoke to reporters for about 10 minutes, and we'll show you those comments as this first vote gets underway.
Ladies and gentlemen, this week the House will vote to direct its committees to start rooting out the regulatory burden that is keeping capital on the sidelines and ensuring that jobs are not being created in America. This is the House that will help create more jobs in America. The Speaker of the House.
Well, thanks, Jeff. Republicans are continuing to be focused on creating an environment that will get economic activity moving in America and help create jobs. And this week, we'll take several more steps keeping our pledge to the American people. Today, we'll begin the discussions about job-killing regulations that are strangling employers all over the country, and directing our committees to identify those regulations and to take further action. Tomorrow, we'll unveil our budget-cutting bill to fund the government from March the 4th through September 30th. Again, keeping our pledge to the American people that we will cut spending. All of this will help create an environment where we'll have more jobs in America. Next week, we expect the President to outline his budget. I'm concerned that it'll have too much spending, too much taxing, and too much borrowing. Those are the kind of activities that I think cause employers to sit on their hands and to protect their pocketbook because of the uncertainty that continues to be created by this administration.
Good morning. Republicans are focused on jobs in the economy like a laser. We have several priorities. One is to reduce unemployment. Two is to work to increase the competitiveness of America and our businesses. And 3, it is to create an environment that fosters long-term economic growth. Today in conference we talked about our plan to cut spending, because that has provided a big inhibitor to investment in job growth. Tomorrow on the floor we'll be talking about ways to reduce the uncertainty surrounding the regulatory environment in this country so our companies, our businesses can be more competitive. We're going to go to the White House today to speak to the President. These are the kind of issues that we're going to talk with him about, that hopefully we can find some common ground so we can see jobs growing in this country again.
Thank you. As you heard from the Speaker and the Leader, the way we turn this economy back around is that we grow the economy and we cut government. If you just take a quick example, that we've been in the majority for 4 weeks. When I look back to the 111th Congress, in the first 4 weeks in the Democratic majority, they added over $600 billion in new spending. This new majority has cut more than $600 billion in the first 4 weeks. So there is a fundamental shift by a new majority. The other idea is about creating jobs, and a lot of that deals with regulation. When you look at the Small Business Administration, they say small business, where 70% of all jobs are created. With those with employees under 20, that it costs more than $10,000 a year per employee. We need to have a fundamentally change. As the Leader said, when we go down to see the President, I'm very hopeful. You won't be there, teleprompters won't be there, but we have a really frank conversation on how we are going to create jobs and cut the spending in Washington.
Last week I met with a company who said the only way that they can comply with the regulations is to not operate. And I meet with many, many business owners who say that the federal government is taking the fun out of the challenge of starting a business and growing jobs. And last November, the American people said no to the failed economic policies that have actually brought us a record high unemployment since its record since the Great Depression. And these policies include like the health care bill, the cap and trade bill that narrowly lost. And yet now we see the administration is trying to implement cap and trade through regulations. That is not the right process, and it's also not the right policy. At a time when 28 million Americans would like to have full-time jobs, we don't need more cap and trade regulations. So today, the Energy and Power Subcommittee is going to be hearing a bill on the Energy Tax Prevention Act. It's to prevent the administration from moving forward on these job-killing regulations. And we support it. We're going to work to get it passed. And we're going to continue to promote the policies that actually put Americans back to work.
I was heartened to hear in the State of the Union the President making the connection between the regulatory burden and the lack of job creation. Unfortunately, he has placed much of that regulatory burden on the American people and on small business. 240 some odd regulations under the permanent bailout bill of Dodd-Frank. 6,000 plus pages of regulations so far under Obamacare, necessitating hundreds of waivers. Every single day we see more of the regulatory burden keeping capital on the sidelines and preventing small business people from either creating a new enterprise or enlarging one to get the American people back to work. And this week the House of Representatives is going to do something about it.
Question. Mr. Speaker, and perhaps Mr. Cantor, you've all said that everything is on the table in terms of cuts. Will that include the Congressional Pension Fund? That roll call reports this morning that at least $26 million taxpayers may be on the hook for, something you've been reluctant to do in the past.
The first order of this new Congress was to cut Congress's own budget. Our leadership budgets got cut, committee budgets got cut, and every single member's account got cut. We're going to continue to look at all ways to save money on behalf of the American people.
Mr. Cantor, could you address that, please?
Yeah, I agree with the Speaker's statement. I would also say that the people deserve a Congress that lives under the same laws that they do. And with bearing that in mind, We also believe that Congress and Washington should be living by the same reality that people do. And right now, it's about cutting spending. It's about making sure that you're not spending money you don't have, which is now bringing on the discussion that everything is on the table, that we have got to learn in Washington how to do more with less.
So it's not a sacred cow.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday you had your first loss as Speaker. Extensions of the Patriot Act went down under suspension. Were you surprised those went down? And specifically, there were 8 freshman members that were nay votes who, had they voted yes, could have passed that bill. Does this foreshadow any problem you have with freshmen going forward?
Well, listen, we've been in the majority 4 weeks. We're not going to be perfect every day. And if the Democrats who voted for these same provisions last year would have voted for them this year, it would have passed. But we're going to get these extensions of the Patriot Act enacted because it's important to the safety and security of the American people.
Why was this under suspension, Mr. Speaker? Why was this? It didn't seem like the votes obviously went down. Why was this scheduled under suspension?
It was.
Speaker Baird, Mr. Cantor yesterday said that he welcomed deeper cuts next week when you have the debate over the CR. Do you support deeper cuts than the Appropriations Committee laid out? And if Republican leaders do want deeper cuts, why not propose them at the outset?
Listen, I've made it clear for months now that I believe that we ought to allow the House to work its will. I've been a big believer of this for the 20 years that I've been here. Now we have a chance to actually do it. And let's let the House make that decision. It's not about my decision. It's not about anybody else's decision. All members, Democrats and Republicans, ought to have the chance to involve themselves in the process of legislating and let all members represent all Americans to develop how much cutting do the American people really want. And so I'm looking forward to the debate. I'll look at the amendments, and let's let the House decide. Thanks.
Republican leadership earlier today at the U.S. Capitol. Here on the House floor, the first of 2 votes. This is a 15-minute vote honoring the late Judge John Roll. It would name a federal courthouse in Yuma, Arizona, after Judge Roll. He was one of 6 killed in the shooting in Tucson, Arizona last month. And this just over from the Associated Press. They're reporting that a spokesman for Representative Gabrielle Giffords says the Congresswoman is speaking, quote, more and more. It's the first confirmation she's able to talk a month after being shot in the forehead. The spokesman, C.J. Karamarjan, says that Giffords spoke for the first time within the past few days. He says that, quote, she's working very hard and it's paying off, and that everyone at the office is elated. That from the Associated Press. Well, coming up is a vote on the United Nations, in particular asking for the return of nearly $180 million that has been overpaid to the United Nations. This is one of the bills that was suggested based on the website, the UCut website, that the Majority Leader, Eric Cantor, has put up. It'll be interesting to see how that vote goes, because as you may have heard in the conversation there with John Boehner, the suspension bill on the Patriot Act, the provisions in the Patriot Act, failed last night, fell short of the 2/3 they needed. The vote was 277 to 148. They need about 285, 290, depending on how many vote, because the numbers in the House are 242 Republicans and 193 or 192 Democrats, depending on where they place Jane Harman. So that vote is coming up next. That'll be a 5-minute vote, and we will have it for you, of course, live here on C-SPAN. In the meantime, we're going to take you to comments from Representative Jay Inslee, who is a member of the House Energy Commerce Subcommittee, and they're meeting today drafting legislation, looking at legislation that would strip the EPA of its authority to regulate greenhouse gas emissions. That meeting going on, that hearing going on today, he was a guest with us this morning on Washington Journal, and we will bring you some of that conversation as this vote continues.
Representative Jay Inslee, Democrat of Washington, Energy and Commerce Committee member, represents the 1st District of Washington, northern part of Seattle. We were just talking about energy issues and this debate over EPA regulations. What is your view?
Well, it won't surprise you that I have a clear view, and it's a beautiful morning to have a clear view here, and that view is that we should reject the Dirty Air Act. I think the Republicans' efforts to pass this Dirty Air Act are very much contrary to the interests of the people I represent. If they were successful in passing the Dirty Air Act, it would essentially gut the Clean Air Act, which has been so successful in helping Americans breathe freely, so successful in reducing asthma. Over 180,000 cases of asthma prevented, 200,000 premature deaths. It's been a very successful law in the Clean Air Act for 40 years. And regretfully, you know, this was started by Republican President Richard Nixon, so it's sad to see my colleagues on the other side really want to gut this act. And when I say gut, I mean this Dirty Air Act would totally eliminate the ability of the Environmental Protection Agency to protect us from very dangerous pollutants, carbon dioxide, ozone, which do precipitate asthma attacks, and a host of other respiratory problems. So we know we can grow our economy with the Clean Air Act. We've done it. We've reduced pollution 60% in the last 40 years, and we've grown our economy by 207%. So we know we're going to innovate our way out of this box. The Dirty Air Act is not the way to go.
And that's not the name of the legislation. Are you giving it a nickname here? The draft legislation by Congressman Upton, Chairman
Well,
Upton?
you could call it. That is not the official name. I think it is the most accurate name. You could call the Dirty Air Act, or you could call it the Inhaler Enhancement Act of 2011 for the kids who are sitting on these inhalers. Now, I have some strong views about this because I know some children that struggle for breath as a result of asthma, and it is not a comfortable picture when you see a young child going through that. This bill will directly reduce the ability of eliminate the ability of the Environmental Protection Agency to stop that pollution, to reduce that pollution dramatically. And when I say eliminate, I mean eliminate. They're not just trying to rein it in or reduce the ability of the EPA. This would cut it off at the ankles and prevent it from stopping that pollution. That's not a way to go. And the reason I say this is that we know that we are the most innovative country in the face of the earth, and we know we can invent our way out of this problem to create these technologies so we can have clean air and jobs so that we can export these new technologies to China. That's a vision, and that's an optimistic future that we should have. You know, during the original, I was looking at some history, during the original Clean Air Act debate, a congressman opposed to the Clean Air Act quoted a mayor who said, Congressman, if this town's going to grow, it has to stink. Well, we don't believe that's true. Our country is greater than that, and we have proved it's greater than that because we've created technologies in the past to give us clean air and job growth. We can do that again. We have to do that again. Either that or China's going to eat our lunch when it comes to high energy technology.
The full committee, the Energy and Commerce Committee, is holding a hearing today on Chairman Upton's draft legislation that would strip the EPA of its authority to regulate greenhouse gas emissions. There you can see the chairman on your screen right now. We're talking about that issue today. Our guest, Congressman Jay Inslee. You talk about the Republicans' legislation, but there are some centrist Democrats, in the Senate in particular, who are looking at this issue and are not happy about the EPA going forward on their rules on carbon. And Senator Rockefeller, Democrat, West Virginia, is asking for a 2-year delay on that issue.
Right, and I would suggest that we need to follow two fundamental American principles when we address this issue. One is science. You know, we fly airplanes, we use cell phones, it depends on science. And in this case, we have to simply listen to the scientists and the physicians. And what they are telling us is if we do not reduce these pollutions, our kids are going to have increasing asthma, our seniors with respiratory problems are going to have increasing respiratory problems, our seniors with heart problems are going to have increasing heart problems. That is unacceptable in America today, number one. Number two, you know, we were celebrating on the floor Ronald Reagan's 100th birthday yesterday, and one of his principal things we celebrate is optimism. And I think those folks who want to pass this Dirty Air Act, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, really need to have a little more optimism about our ability to innovate our way out of our energy challenges. Now, I have seen in the last few months Americans shining when it comes to this innovation. You know, the car of the year this year was an electric car, a plug-in electric hybrid car made by General Motors, the Chevy Volt. There's the kind of innovation that can solve our problem. I went the coolest thing I've ever gone to a few weeks ago. I went to a benediction of the very first electric car charging station at a church in America.
Mr. Polis votes aye.
In Woodinville, Washington. It's kind of neat because we got to say, let there be light.
Mr. Smith of Washington.
That's the kind of innovation
Smith of
that
Washington
we ought
votes
to
aye.
be confident in ourselves and to be able to grow in this country and eventually
Jackson
sell
of
to
Illinois.
the world. So
Mr.
if you
Jackson of
care
Illinois
about
votes aye.
Americans'
Mr.
health,
Kucinich.
and if you care about Americans' economic
Kucinich
health,
votes aye.
the
Mr.
Dirty
Levin.
Air Act is not a solution to our problems. It is hearkening back to fear
George Miller
and
of
a sort of defeatist attitude that we can't solve this problem and have our clean air too. I'm convinced we can do it because I've seen all across this country these innovations coming into play.
This is a story in the Washington Examiner's website. It says that Senator Barbara Boxer, the chairman of the Environment and Public Works Committee over there, is saying the Senate has the votes to delay EPA carbon regulations.
Well, we will see. We don't know. We do have a president in the White House with a veto pen as well, and if that's what it takes, fine. And I think Americans would support, if necessary, a veto of the Dirty Air Act. And the reason is that Americans of all stripes, Republicans and Democrats, they do share one thing in common. We like to breathe. And when you make breathing more difficult for our children, that is not something that is really a good idea. Now, I have to admit that there are a number of lobbyists for some of the major fossil fuel industries in Washington, D.C. And they do have some sway in the aisles of power. But when you go out on Main Street and ask people, do you want your congressman to remove the ability of environmental protection to protect the health of your child, I don't think that plays well. And maybe it does in the lobbying community for the fossil fuel industry, but not on Main Street. And I hope people will start to think about this.
But Republicans point to the last election and polls that show that 70% of Americans reject cap and trade, that they don't buy into this issue, and that it's unpopular. Republicans also argue that EPA should not be passing these rules, that's the power of Congress.
Some argued against the Clean Air Act when it was originally instituted. Of course, there is always special interest that wants to reject the ability to protect Americans' health. But we've got to be a little more optimistic and stronger than that. And by the way, I disagree with your assessment. Two-thirds of Americans at least want regulation in some sense of these pollutants. Now, maybe cap and trade, as they were described to it, maybe that wasn't the vehicle they liked. But if you go out and anywhere in the country and you ask this simple question, should the EPA have the ability to protect the health of our children by regulating these pollutants, the answer by overwhelming majorities will be yes. And I'm happy to stand on that rock and debate anyone, any town in America about that, because we all have kids, Republicans and Democrats. And that's what is at risk here very much. And by the way, you know, the real issue is here is who is going to make the decisions about our health. Physicians and scientists or the lobbying community here in Washington, D.C. And I think we've got to listen to the science on this, which has been very clear. Our children's health is in jeopardy. We have the ability to act, and the Clean Air Act mandates it. We should follow it.
Let's go to Stephen, who's a Republican in Princeton, West Virginia. You're on the air, sir.
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to ask our your guest if he has ever saw an electric battery explode. And they do have the capacity to do that. And the EPA, all this, you know, it's just they've declared war on the coal business, and that's all it is. They can call it anything they want. That's what they're after. They're after to destroy the coal business. Why don't they just come out and say it?
Well, the electric batteries have had fires in the past, in decades past, but like many technologies, they've improved dramatically. And if you go out and drive a Chevy Volt, or not to be parochial, or a Nissan Leaf, or an American-made Tesla, I think you will love the experience. These electric cars, I think, they're selling like hotcakes, and the reason is they're fun to drive. They're incredibly fast. They've got instant torque, and they're very quiet, and they're zero polluting, at least when you drive the car. So I think we're going to find a wide acceptance of electric cars when people get behind the wheel. Now, your issue about coal is an important one. There is a potential for coal to be a significant part of our energy future, but we need to find a way to sequester, to bury, to keep the dangerous pollutant, carbon dioxide, out of the atmosphere. I had lunch the day before yesterday with a company in Seattle that has developed a way to compress carbon dioxide to take it out of the gasification stream of coal, so you can burn coal, take the dangerous pollutant, carbon dioxide, compress it, and put it underground where it doesn't cause anybody any health problems. Now that future, and that company just signed a contract with some folks in China to continue this development. We want to do this development here. And I'm excited about that technology. In fact, our bill that we passed last year in the House would have created...
On this vote, the yeas are 429, the nays are 0. Two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The unfinished business is on the vote on the motion of the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Rice-Blakeman, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 519, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 519, a bill to secure the return to the United States the $179 million overpaid into the United Nations Tax Equalization Fund as of December 31st, 2009, and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote. Gavel? Whatever, right?
The House unanimously approves a bill that names a new federal courthouse in Yuma, Arizona, after the late federal Judge John Roll, who was killed in Tucson last month. This, as the Associated Press reports this afternoon, that a spokesman for Representative Gabrielle Giffords says the Congresswoman is speaking more and more. The first confirmation that she's able to talk a month after being shot in the forehead. Her spokesman, C.J. Karamarjan, says Giffords spoke for the first time within the past few days. Quoting a spokesman, the AP writes, quote, "She's working very hard and it's paying off." So the last vote in this series on the House floor, this is H.R. 519. This is a bill recommended from Eric Cantor's UCut website. It is a 5-minute vote. The bill would ask for nearly $180 million that the U.S. has paid into the United Nations Tax Equalization Fund. For that to be returned, the U.S. has overpaid into the fund, and now the UN is setting aside some of that money to improve security at the UN headquarters in New York City. Representative Peter King spoke about that earlier as the Politico is reporting that he has been lobbying against the UN bill at the behest of the Police Commissioner of New York, Raymond Kelly. He spoke against the bill earlier today on the House floor. Here are his comments.
Madam Speaker, I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I rise in opposition to this legislation. And I say that as one who has voted continually for reform at the UN, who has been critical of funding procedures involving the UN. But I'm here today to save lives. The fact is, contrary to what's been said, I don't want to get caught in a counting debate. I don't want to get caught in a fight between Democrats and Republicans, between the Obama administration, the State Department, the UN, between chairmen and ranking members. I am here because of the fact that this is not something that started 3 months ago or 4 months ago or 5 months ago. This has been an ongoing matter between the New York City Police Department and the UN and the State Department. The results of an attack in this area would be catastrophic. I'm not going to go into the details, but anyone who wants to check the series of correspondence going back long before this became an issue here in Congress about how vital it was to have this $100 million in construction changes and hardening made, whether we're talking about First Avenue or the FDR Drive or the perimeter. The fact is, this is a disaster waiting to happen. And I would say to members on both sides, if there is an attack, if there is a vehicle bomb, if there is an attack in these areas that have been designated by Commissioner Kelly, and we see hundreds of lives lost or thousands of lives lost, we're going to come back and say, well, that could have been taken care of, but it was in this account rather than that account. It was authorized but not appropriated, or it was spent by the UN at the direction of the State Department, and Congress didn't have time to act in time. The fact is, this is a matter of life and death. This is a serious matter. I was on the phone late last night at midnight with the highest-ranking people in the New York City Police Department, and how vital this is to them. We can have our debate back and forth. We can go back and forth on when it should have been done, who was hiding what. The fact is, I'm concerned with saving lives, not just for New Yorkers, but all the tourists that visit there, the impact this would have. And for people who are concerned about saving money, think of, put it in very harsh economic terms, what this would do to our economy if a car bomb went off in the vicinity specified by Commissioner Kelly, and we saw lives being lost, people being burned to death. We saw buildings coming down because we felt the money wasn't done exactly the appropriate way as far as which which part of the balance sheet it came off. So I am urging my colleagues to save lives, to do what has to be done for security, put partisan politics aside. And it's not just important to know the cost of something, it's important to know the value of something and the damage that can be caused if that value is impaired. So I urge the defeat of this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
House Homeland Security Chairman Peter King, Republican of New York, speaking against the United Nations bill earlier today. 5-minute suspension bill, meaning it has to pass with a two-thirds vote, two-thirds President. On the Republican side, there are 242 Republicans, around 290 needed for passage.
On this vote, the yeas are 256.
Open.
Mr. Scott of Virginia. Mr. Scott of Virginia votes no. Mr. LaTourette.